Please join me in welcoming Marissa Mayer. Marissa, wow.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, I can't
that was very flattering, but
well, I can't tell you how pleased we are to have you here, and you have really achieved just unbelievably. You know, your work ethic is legend, and your productivity is beyond anybody's expectation. Where did this come from?
well, I don't know. I do like to work hard. I like to get a lot of things done, but I actually think that a lot of it is the power of technology and the internet. I think that when I remember being really struck. I had been at Google for about 6 months. I got a little bit of time away, and I got to go to Switzerland. It's one of my favorite places. And I went into a cyber cafe, and I'd gotten so used to seeing the Google homepage every day that I was kind of desensitized to it. And I remember walking behind someone, and they had Google up on their screen. Today, that wouldn't be remarkable, but at the time, I sort of walked past it, and all of a sudden I was like, wait, what is that doing here? Right, this is the site I'm working on with 20 of my friends in California. What is that doing here in Switzerland? And it really just showed that you could actually take an idea, take technology, take the different projects and things that you're working on and make them global and affect billions of people really, really quickly. This idea that we had been working on with a really small team had already made it halfway around the world was really, really remarkable to me.
I said in the introduction that you'd been accepted at all the colleges, and certainly Harvard and Yale aren't bad schools, and you decided to go to Stanford. How did you come to that decision?
Well, I think it was kind of by a different process of elimination. But for me, when I went and looked at schools, I had applied to a lot of Midwestern colleges. I was very committed to medicine. So I'm really excited to be here. I've always been a big admirer of Toby's and of the Cleveland Clinic. So I thought a lot about Johns Hopkins and had been actually accepted into Northwestern's program where they bring you directly into medical school out of undergrad, et cetera. But at the last minute, I realized that I wanted to have a really broad undergraduate education. And so at the last minute that April, as I was deciding, I decided I wanted to go somewhere where if I did change away from medicine, which at the time I didn't think I would, but I ultimately ended up doing, that I would have a lot of different choices. And when I looked at Stanford, I really liked the breadth of it. I really liked the feel of the campus, and there was just something that appealed to me. And it was funny because my mother was very concerned about my last minute change of heart. For most of the month, I had actually thought I was going to go to Duke. Duke is also a great school, but I had spent the whole month saying Duke, and then all of a sudden, the last minute, I changed to Stanford, and my mother was really very panicked about it, and said, you need to talk to your father. And my father came home that night, and he said, well, why do you want to go? And I explained to him all the different reasons, and he said, that makes sense to me. He's like, also, when you visited Stanford last summer, he's like, it's all you talked about for a month afterwards. He's like, I was wondering when you'd remember. And I was like, oh, okay, so.
I remember that year, and Duke didn't make it to the NCAA that year either, did they?
No.
And then you went with the idea of becoming a pediatric neurosurgeon.
That's right. I really love working with children. I had been a prolific babysitter and really loved kids. And I was really interested in how the brain worked. And so, went to Stanford, did all the chemistry and biology for freshman and sophomore year. And it was sort of interesting.
That was enough to turn you off right there?
Well, no, I did like it. But
Turned me off.
One of the things was that having looked at a lot of different schools, and Stanford was expensive, it was far away, it was
warm.
Yeah, no, but I'm a Midwestern girl. I actually like the cold, but I would say that as I thought about it, it really made a lot of sense to me that I should try and do something I could do uniquely at Stanford. Because when I went home that summer and talked with all my friends, a lot of us were thinking about medicine, and I realized we literally all had the same flashcards. We all had the same carbon sets to make the different the different models. And I realized that I was like, well, what could I do uniquely at Stanford? And so I started taking a little bit of a look around while I continued doing the BioCore, and found that Stanford's terrific in psychology, it's terrific in computer science. There's a couple of fields where it's number one, and then I found this interesting major that actually took a bunch of their number one disciplines and combined them. And it was called symbolic systems. And
It was called what?
Symbolic systems. So systems of symbols, like alphabets and coding languages is ultimately where it builds towards. But it takes philosophy, psychology, linguistics, and computer science and puts them all in the same major. And so the idea is you take cognitive psychology, how do people learn? You take philosophy, how do people reason? You take linguistics, how do people express themselves? And then you roll computer science into it, can you teach a computer to do the same? And as interested as I was in the brain, I realized I was much more interested in how the brain works than in the actual physiology of it. And so the only thing I didn't know a lot about in that major was linguistics. So I remember I took a linguistics class on the side during my sophomore year, and I really liked that. And so then I ultimately ended up switching majors into that because I had taken some computer science in my freshman year, really liked it, felt really confident that it was something that was going to be really, really push the world forward. And then when I could see this interesting way of combining it into my passion, it was too good to ignore.
On for a master's after that. So what was the master's?
The master's was in computer science.
So how did you go from linguistics to computer science?
Yeah, well, so symbolic systems does have a heavy computer science component because you do a specialization. For example, mine was artificial intelligence. How do computers emulate reasoning and thinking? But one of the things that I realized, I almost did an inverted education because when you do a specialization in symbolic systems, you take all the master's and PhD level seminars. So I had taken all these master's and PhD level seminars in artificial intelligence, but then as I went to graduate, I realized I had never written an operating system. I had never written a compiler. And in computer science, that's actually pretty fundamental if you're gonna go out and try and be a software engineer to actually understand, how do you write code, how does it get compiled into a program, how does it get executed on hardware, what is the operating system layer, how does that interact with it? And so then what I did is I continued on to do a computer science master's, and I went back and took compilers, operating systems, graphics, a lot of the fundamental pieces of computer science. So I kind of did it the opposite way.
So then at the end of that, and at the end of a couple internships, then you had to decide where you're going to go to work. You had 14 job offers?
Well, I mean, to put it in context, it wasn't that unusual because it was 1999. Computer sciences were in high demand. It was the height of the first internet bubble.
I didn't have any. Cardiac surgeons were in high demand at that point, too.
It was really literally you'd go to the gym at Stanford, and if people found out you were a computer science grad coming up, they'd be like, my buddy's got a company. You should talk to him. So I was also somewhat indeterminate about what I wanted to do. I had done a lot of lecturing at Stanford, so I thought a lot about teaching.
Did you like teaching?
I liked teaching a lot. I thought a lot about teaching. I thought about doing some technology consulting. I thought about programming. I didn't know if I wanted to be at a big company or a little company. So I kind of, did kind of a sampling across all of those different fields. And it was very easy for me to pick my preferred job offer in each of the fields. If I was teaching, I would go here. If I was going to do consulting, I would go there. But it was hard to actually integrate across.
Did you do a
those.
spreadsheet?
I did. Well, I had a matrix. I love matrices.
Not surprising.
And so I had this whole matrix, which was actually, it led to what I always quote as the best piece of advice I've ever gotten. But I'd done a matrix for when I picked my college, with all the different college choices and all kinds of different facets, one row for each college, one column for each facet. And I did the same thing for my jobs. So I had each job offer on a line and then all these different columns. By then, of course, I had a friend who was an economics major, and he was like, I don't think we can actually model these these cells with values. They're really trajectories and curves, and we spent the whole night drawing up all these curves and trying to figure out happiness, lifestyle factor, where things could go, all these different pieces. And at the end, I had put off my job decision too long. It was the beginning of May, and I remember getting really overwhelmed, and just feeling really overwhelmed, sort of just about the whole process, and just really flustered. And Andre, my friend who was helping me, sort of stopped and said, well, what's going on? I was like, well, I have to pick something, and I just it's not at all clear what to pick. And I was really overwhelmed by the whole piece. I remember kind of like bursting in tears at about midnight. And he was like, well, this has been really fun for me, doing all these graphs and charts. And I was like, well, I'm glad it's fun for you, but it's really stressful for me. And he said, he's like, I've now looked at this for the last 5 or 6 hours with you, and I think I understand it at least as well as you do. But he's like, I think you're approaching it all wrong. I was like, okay. And he said, you're looking at it and you're trying to find the right choice. And he's like, that's not what I see in this matrix. What I see are a bunch of good choices. And then there's the one that you pick and commit to and make great. And I think that was, I often see things in very black and white. The right choice, the wrong choice, the best choice, the less than good choice. And I think it was really important that I think that is the best piece of advice I've ever gotten, which is to just say, in a lot of situations, there's a lot of good options, and then there's the one that you pick to and commit to and make great. And so so I went to sleep that night and woke up in the morning, and Google was the first thing that I thought about in the morning. It was where my mind had kind of gravitated towards, and it was for all kinds of reasons I could articulate, like how smart the people there were, and the fact that I felt really unprepared to take a risk that big, because most startups do fail. And all kinds of reasons I couldn't articulate, but I just wanted to do it. And so, that was the process of choosing Google. But it obviously worked out. It worked out really well. At the time, I thought I was like, I realized I could do consulting, I could do teaching, but I wanted to be in the process of building a company. And I realized that getting to be there, being a part of the decisions, understanding how you try to build a Fortune 500 company or how you try to build something that the whole world can use. Even if you fail, you're going to learn a lot more being part of those discussions than consulting on those discussions or being more removed from them.
So what did you think the chances of Google succeeding were when you went into it?
I thought it was about 2%.
Wow.
Which, by the way, and people always think that that's low, but the truth is, most startups, my odds would be probably like 0.2, 0.02%. Most startups don't succeed. So the fact that they were I thought we had a 1 in 50 chance of actually, seeing through some or all of their vision of how search could change the world, Larry and Sergey's vision of how search could change the world, was actually pretty good odds.
So one of the other job opportunities with McKinsey, how did you think their chances were?
Well, McKinsey is McKinsey, and they're very successful. And I've got a lot of good friends who work there. They actually have helped us quite a bit, throughout my career, both at Google and at Yahoo. They're a great firm, but I will say that, to me, it really came down to, I just felt like being a part of those decisions and discussions and trying to help build it, as opposed to being one step removed. I just felt like I would learn so much more, even if we failed.
What was the most exciting thing you did at Google?
Oh, that's really hard.
I mean, you got a long list of
I was
accomplishments.
I was at Google for 13 years, and they are my family. And they were my entire life for the time that I was there. Overall, I think there's 2 elements I would cite. I think that just seeing how that idea and that concept and that vision that Larry and Sergey had of how search could change the world, getting to see that kind of idea succeed was really amazing, and the scope and the responsibility that technology plays in the world today is really amazing to have just been a part of and be approximate to. And I would also say, to me, what really kept me going every day was the people. The people were just amazing, and the culture was just terrific. And I thought that it would change more over time, but it was really pretty invariant throughout the years. We were just able to attract a lot of people who wanted to change the world for the better. And I would remember conversations we'd have at 2 or 3 in the morning my first year at Google about we could scan all the world's books and we could do this, and we had no means by which to pursue any of those projects. And then thinking, even fast forwarding 5 years, 10 years later, having those same late night conversations. And if you didn't know the voices and you just had recordings of the conversations, they would have sounded exactly the same, because the motivation for what people really wanted to try and achieve was very constant throughout, and it was just a really amazing environment to work in.
I got to ask you an inside baseball question. You were there when Eric Schmidt came on board. Mm-hmm. How did he influence the organization?
Eric is amazing.
Yes, he is.
Yes, he's absolutely terrific. And I will say, it's an interesting triumvirate, is what they called it, for a number of years there at Google with Eric, Larry, and Sergey. And I'm very good friends with all 3 of them. I would say I respect Larry the most. He has amazing ideas and an amazing vision and drive. I love Sergey the most. He's just funny and sweet and clever in all kinds of interesting ways and just very insightful. But I learned the most from Eric, right? He was often kind of branded as the parental oversight or the adult supervision of the company, which we all kind of resented, by the way. We were like, we don't necessarily need adult supervision. But I will say, in a way, he did have so much experience from his time at Sun, from Novell. He had so many management theories. Just everything from, when should you do a reorganization? If you do a reorganization, how should you do it? And it's interesting because of the 3 of them, I worked, intensely with all 3 of them during that time, but I hear Eric still in my head every day. Every day, I hear an Eric Schmidtism. I'll be in a conversation, I'll think about something, and I'll hear, oh, right, Eric always said the right way to do this was X.
So then it came time to leave. And you, out of the blue, got an invitation to go to Yahoo. Tell us about the process, the emotion, the decision-making that made that change. It really stunned the world.
It stunned me a little bit, too. I was really happy at Google. I had loved all my time working on search, and I had gotten to work on a lot of different projects over the years, too. And then, in 2010, Larry and Sergey approached me and they said, you've been working on lots of different things, but the one common vein throughout has been the core search engine, which I had worked on since I had arrived, and in just various different capacities throughout. And they said, we would really like to try a new model of operating. And it was interesting because I've now seen that model of operating span out from my GM role, my general manager role on Google Maps, to ultimately how Larry reorganized the company in 2011, and now even on a broader scale to Alphabet. And they said, we'd like to try this new way of operating. We'd really like for you to move over and run all of the location and mapping projects. And it wouldn't be just product, because up until then I had always done product management in conjunction with engineering, but actually managing the engineering group, managing the marketing group, really putting it together as if it's a small company inside of Google. And I was hesitant to leave search, but at the same time I realized that if I was ever going to make a change, it was a good time to make it. And so I gave it a try, and I loved it. I would say at first it was really overwhelming, because as much as maps and search are very related, it was just a completely different set of circumstances. We were buying satellite imagery for Sweden, and you wonder why is it 6 times or 10 times more expensive than for Norway? Right, just learning all about satellites and how they take pictures, and it turns out Sweden's got an unbelievable amount of cloud cover, so it makes it very hard to get satellite pictures. So when you get them, they're very valuable. So just learning all about all of these new elements, and what it made me realize that I had learned so much during search, but getting to start over in a new but related domain, I got to learn so much more again. And it made me, I would say it probably predisposed me to being open to the idea of change. Where before that, I was like, look, we're doing Google search, it's huge, it's important, this is what I want to be doing, I love it. But I realized when I moved, I was so happy doing maps and getting back into that deep learning mode that I sort of realized that change is good, and which of course is very fundamental. But I did like it. And then I had been working on getting on board just because I had been at Google for such a long time. I didn't really know how other companies operated, et cetera. And so I had joined the Walmart board with the help of a firm in New York called Spencer Stewart and a man named Jim Citron. It was a long process, like a year-long process of joining the board and then formally getting voted on at their shareholders meeting in June. And I was in Asia on a business trip, and Jim kept trying to call me, and I assumed he was just trying to call me to say, congratulations, we finally got you on the board at Walmart. And so when we just kept missing each other, I was in I think I was in Beijing or Shanghai, and he was in New York. So I decided I would just call him back. I tried a few times from Asia, and I just figured I would call him back when I got back to California. And I called him back, and he said, well, I'm calling about an executive search. And I said, well, but I'm really happy, here at Google, and I figured this was, just about Walmart. And he was like,
that was a challenge.
He's like, I have a board, and he wouldn't tell me the name of the company. It was funny. So he was like, I have this board. They specifically asked for you. He's like, it's a great fit for your skill set. It's right in your, and it's not right in your domain. It's right in your neighborhood. Because it turns out Yahoo's about 2 or 3 exits down the freeway further than Google. So it is really right in my neighborhood. And so he was going, and he's like, and he just went on about it, and he still was being very cagey and wouldn't tell me the name. And then I guessed it. He'd given me enough clues. But I said, are you talking about Yahoo? And he was like, I am. And he's like, are you interested? And I said, yes. And he said, really? Which the board later did not appreciate his his disbelief that I was interested. But I was interested because I'd always, Yahoo was the first, king of king of the internet, the internet company. When I had been graduating in 1999, I'd always really respected it. They were a big help to Google throughout, using our services, helping us learn a lot, operationalizing better, being a better partner. And so, I'd always really admired Yahoo. They had obviously gone through a lot of turbulence between starting about 2008 until that period. But the other thing is, I like art a lot. And I remember talking once to someone who runs a gallery, and I said, how do you decide which artists you like to work with? And he said, well, I like local artists. I like to support the local economy. And he was like, but I only work with nice artists. And he's like, was one, life is too short to work with people who aren't nice. And 2, he was like, if an artist isn't nice, you feel it in their work. He's like, you can tell when you look at a painting and that person who created it is unhappy. And I think that's actually true in a lot of different things. It's just true in fashion. You can tell, and people often joke, you can tell if a fashion designer really likes women or not based on their clothes. Right? So there, it kind of shows in different ways. And reflecting back to Yahoo, I felt like I could just tell there were so many really good, nice, funny, motivated people there who loved sports and pop culture and games and media and mail and search and loved so many of the things that I loved, that I just knew that despite the fact the company had gone through this really turbulent period, there were still good people there, and there was an amazing set of assets on the global stage. And I knew a lot about the different pieces: mail, search, maps, news, mobile, social, but I really was eager to sort of learn about them in a new context.
So what was the discussion with the triumvirate about you leaving?
Well, I will say a CEO transition like that is always tricky, just because both Google and Yahoo are public companies. And so the Yahoo board had been very secretive in the overall process. It was kind of a bizarre point in my life where I would literally walk out in front of my house and a black town car would pull up. And they would roll down the window and I'd say Project Cardinal, which was the code name. And they'd be like, yes, and I would get in. So it had been all very secretive. And so it had been very secretive. And then, we got to the point where they'd offered me the job. We had worked through and negotiated my contract. And I got to the point where I was prepared to sign. And they said, look, like, I had to think through what were my decisions, what points, like what did I want to know about? And one of the things I really wanted was some insight from people inside the company, because I had talked to the board, but that's different than the people who work there every day. And I had a good friend who had worked there for a long time, and so I'd asked for permission to talk to him. His name is Farzad Nizam. But in the end, the other person I really wanted to talk to was David Filo, the founder, who's come to work at Yahoo literally every day since the founding of it. And that was actually one of the funnier parts of the story, because I said, I really want to talk to Filo, the founder. He's also Yahoo's largest shareholder. And I really just want to understand what he thinks is happening in the company, where he would go from here, what possibilities and potential he has. And then, they were, the board was very concerned about how to have a covert meeting between me and Filo that nobody in Silicon Valley would see, because everyone was speculating as to who the new Yahoo CEO might be. And it turns out we didn't know it, but Philo and I live on the same street in Palo Alto. And so he was like, so he just walked over for Sunday night pizza. So we had a pizza delivered, and he walked over, and we sat and talked about Yahoo over pizza. And then the next morning, it came time I had to go sign my offer letter. Like the chairman co-signed sometime later, because it wasn't a valid document until we both signed. And then I also said, look, I know that this is something that needs to be decided and announced quickly, but I have to talk to Larry, Sergey, and Eric. And so I was like, even ahead of the aftermarket announcement, I want to talk to them. And so I managed to get in touch with them in the hour or two before I left. It was actually later than I hoped, because Sergey rollerblades to work, and it had taken a little longer that day. So I was like waiting there with bated breath, waiting for Sergey to arrive on his roller skates, on his rollerblades. But it was overall, and they were really very encouraging. I think at that point they understood that I had made the decision that I was going to go. And Sergey was actually terrific. He just immediately, he was like, it's a big loss for us. We're obviously going to miss you. But he's like, what an opportunity. And, I have all these ideas. And so he started rattling off all these ideas of what I should do at Yahoo. And I really appreciated that. And so I think, it was, I thought overall it was handled in a way that I was happy with, and I think they were happy with.
Did they give you any words of wisdom on the way out the door?
The one that I remember most is, I've gotten to work on so many different technologies over the years, but there's a concept of, starters and finishers. And I don't know that I totally believe in the concept, but there's some people who are better at starting things, and there's some people who are better at finishing things. And interestingly, people often mismap themselves. Like if you think you're a good starter, it probably is because you're a good finisher, probably because people want to be the other. And so it's sort of funny, because I always thought of myself as a starter. And there was one point when we were having this conversation, and I forget if it was Larry or Sergey, but literally I made this comment, I was like, I guess I'm a starter. And they doubled over laughing so hard that I actually looked to see what they were laughing at. And they were like, actually, no, we're laughing at the concept that you're a starter, because they're like, you're really a finisher, like the fit, the finish, the details, all of these different pieces. But it is true, like I like to sort of take an idea and then polish it up and productize it and think about how it would best be deployed, et cetera. And over the years, I think, Sergey had worked with me enough to know that like a lot of times I would get really hung up on those details and the fit and finish elements of it. And he knew that Yahoo was going to need a big jolt, not incrementalism. And so right as I left, he had rattled off about 20 different ideas of what he would do. I remember I said, it was about 5 minutes to 1. And I said, Sergey, I've got to leave soon. The announcement's going to come out. He was my last conversation. So I said, the announcement's going to come out. I have to go soon. He's like, I understand. And I got up and I put my hand on the doorknob. And just as I got my hand on the doorknob, Sergey said, Marissa, wait. And I turned back and he just said, don't forget to be bold.
Be bold.
Don't forget to be bold. And that was the last thing he said as I left. And so that refrain has stayed in my head too. I do think that, to really bring Yahoo, the iconic company that it is, back to greatness, we've got to remember to be bold and to take chances.
So you went to a company that had gone from over $100 billion in market cap to down around 5. And
Well, by the
which
time
was-
I'd gotten there, it had rebounded a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah.
But true story. Yes.
But was hurting significantly, and you knew that you had to make some significant changes and decisions. Well, tell me about the decision to go mobile.
Yeah, I think that the most important piece, I mean, what makes all technology companies work are their products and the fact that people really want to use those products. And those products are all driven by my earlier anecdote and analogy around artists and how things feel, are all driven by people. And so you end up in a world where the technology companies who have the best people ultimately end up with the best products, and they have the best technology, and it becomes a really self-fulfilling flywheel. And so, I really needed to solve for the products. Yahoo has a vibrant advertising business. It does $4 or $5 billion plus a year. Gross revenue is even higher than that. It's one of the largest digital advertising businesses in the world. And so, on the business side of it, yes, there was work to be done, but it wasn't as fundamental as the products, a lot of which hadn't been updated in 10 years, a lot of which really looked like they were from a decade prior and had really lost relevance, particularly with the rise of mobile devices. The interesting thing is, in my first year there, we had gathered a list of what people do on their mobile phones, their smartphones, in frequency order. And if you looked at it, it was interesting. One of the people on my team, Laurie Mann, commented, he said, if you listen to that list, if you close your eyes and listen to that list, it's actually what Yahoo does, right? Because it's mail, maps, they have phone, text, et cetera, but it's mail, maps, check the news, games, check sports scores, get stock quotes, share photos, group communication. And if you actually listen to it, yes, it's a list of what people do on their phones, but it's basically a list of Yahoo's products. Yet at the time when I arrived, we didn't have a coherent mobile app strategy. We didn't have many apps that had more than even just a few thousand users on it. We had less than 50 people in the company working on mobile. And the vision that I had sold the board on was this vision that Yahoo could go mobile, take all of these amazing assets, user bases, information that it had built on the web, and really do a much better job bringing it to the mobile phone. And that was the cornerstone of what ultimately became Mavens, this acronym that we use for mobile, video, native, and social, which has to do with how we want people to interact, what kinds of advertisements we want, how rich and interactive they are. This is an overview, I think, of our mobile team at work in our Sunnyvale offices. But we worked really hard to recruit a great team for mobile. We grew that team from less than 50 to 500 in about 18 months with terrific quality. We fixed, I think, a lot of what I would say were mistakes in terms of the app strategy. Because we even had things like, we had really legendary brands like Yahoo Finance that everyone knew on the web. But when it was launched on the phone, it was launched as Market Dash, and no one knew it was Yahoo Finance. Or we had Yahoo Sports, and they launched it as Sportacular, which is a clever brand name, but doesn't tell anyone that it's Yahoo Sports. And so we did a lot just to clean up the branding, clean up the experiences, and really we're focused on what makes the best possible mobile application.
What do you use your phone for?
Well, I use my phone for almost everything these days, but
Most
email
common.
is still the thing I use on my phone the most is email. Though obviously texting, sharing photos, all of those things are up there as well.
So how did Katie Couric come into the picture?
Well, I think one of the interesting pieces of our history is that at Google, we were always cataloging other people's content. At Yahoo, the company had started a few years before Google and had really looked at organizing the web, but in many ways, the web needed to be more interesting. So they got into actually, hosting Yahoo News and writing their own news articles or creating videos to watch online. And they really worked hard to create content. And that was something new for me coming from Google because we had not done very much in terms of content creation at Google. And so there is this entire media element of Yahoo, which was really fun and freeing. My first summer there, we had reporters at the Summer Olympics, we had reporters at the national conventions for the presidential election. It was, but these were sort of a new element of it. But that said, I found that our reporters had, in many cases, just become, unfortunately, it wasn't very much fun for them, and I didn't think it produced a very high quality product, had become packagers for many of our publishing partners. Take this article from another news site, package it up, reformat it, put it on Yahoo. And I really wanted to raise the journalistic integrity and quality of what we were working on. And so we worked really hard at setting good journalistic standards. We still obviously are a big distributor and publisher of content, driving those clicks to other people's sites and also to that content hosted on our site. But I wanted us to also take the personality and the original voice of Yahoo and turn it into something. And so we have an event each year for CMOs, and the first year we actually had Katie Couric come, and it was my job to interview her over dinner. It was kind of funny because I actually botched the first question. They say there are no bad questions, but when you're interviewing an interviewer as talented as Katie, apparently there are. But we recovered from that.
We're making me very nervous.
We recovered from that, and then at the end of it, I said, okay, well, what's next for you, Katie? And she said, I really, my whole career I've been fascinated by digital. I'd really like to, so for one of my last turns, really, play a role much like Ariana Huffington or Tina Brown, or and really get very deeply digitally savvy. And she's always been very digitally savvy. She brought a lot to the Today Show and to the nightly news in the form of trying to bring things both online and offline. And I thought it was great, and the CMOs loved it. They were like, yes, it just sort of drove home how important digital was. And we walked off stage, and I was like, that was really nice of you to say. It really, wrapped up the interview in a nice way. But I was like, but were you serious about that, or were you just saying that to be nice? And she said, no, I'm really serious about it. And I was like, well, then we should talk. Because obviously, we could really use a journalistic voice like yours here at Yahoo. And so the conversation transpired from there, and then we hired her to be our global anchor. So she does all of her interviews and really helps a lot of our reporters across the board. And she's done just a terrific job. Talk about productivity. She's one of the most productive and just highest caliber journalists around. And so we've been really, really thrilled to have her. And she's really upped our game and really helped, our entire staff of reporters and editors up their game.
Now, speaking about talent, you went out and purchased more than 50 companies. And did you do that? Why did you do that? We bought a lot of companies. I will say a lot of them were small. Mm-hmm. Some of them were quite big, like Tumblr. So we had some big purchases. But we thought of the companies we acquired in tiers. Strategic acquisitions, building block acquisitions, and talent acquisitions. And the vast majority of them, I would say we did somewhere in the order of about 40 talent acquisitions. I'll come back to those in a minute. We did about 6 or 7 building block acquisitions, and we've done about 3 large strategic acquisitions, Tumblr, Brightroll, and Flurry. And for the strategic acquisitions, my view is they need to pull the company in a new strategic direction, and they need to reinforce mavens. They need to reinforce mobile, video, native, and social, and hopefully a few components therein. So obviously Tumblr is mobile, it has native ads, there's actually a large video and photo component on it, and it's inherently social. So it really touched all of the key pillars. Brightroll is a video ad platform, so it touched on video as well as native advertising. Flurry is all mobile analytics, and so it really touched mobile and then a lot of measurement elements that we work on, and it was an amazing platform to really take what we were building on Mavens and distribute it into different applications. So strategic acquisitions need to build on mobile, video, native, and social, and really pull the company in a new direction we wouldn't have gone in on our own organically or incrementally. The building block acquisitions are about taking some of the older pieces of technology we have and updating them, not only so they are just easier to work with and easier to maintain, but also again, pulling us into a new direction. So for example, we bought a little company called Zobni, which is inbox backward. They were working on email and really revolutionizing it. But one of the big breakthroughs that they had during their tenure was around contacts.
Could they help people organize contacts that much better, such that when someone changes jobs or changes email addresses or changes phone numbers, could that that contact book just immediately update? And could they actually sync your phone book onto your phone, et cetera, to just make all of your contacts really seamless? That's a great building block acquisition for us, where we want the people, but we also want the technology to build on top of it. We bought a little company called Aviate that does mobile search, and obviously that next phase of search that goes mobile is incredibly important. And they had not only great people, but they also had some really interesting technologies about how to find and weave applications together into the overall experience. So I was very excited about those. And then there was the talent acquisition piece, because one of the things that had happened at Yahoo during those turbulent periods is we had a lot of terrific people who had stayed at the company and remained loyal. We have just, last week actually, we have a big Friday meeting called FYI, and I think we had like 8 people who were celebrating their 15-year anniversaries at Yahoo, and we now have several hundred people who have been there for 15 years. In the medical profession, that might not be as rare. In technology, having like 10 and 15-year people is like unheard of, let alone hundreds of them. So we had some people who had stayed, but at the same time, the company had suffered from a lot of attrition. There was a lot of apprehensiveness. Even for me, as I said, I was somewhat apprehensive, and I really wanted to talk to Philo about, what is the scene inside the company right now? Are people still building things? Are they shipping products? Are they excited to do it? Are they afraid, et cetera? All the people that we were trying to hire to come in and build those mobile applications, build those native ads and social applications, all had the same questions I did coming in as CEO. And in a lot of cases, there were 2 things that were happening. One, to get those people that we really needed. We needed to get those best people to build the best products, ultimately get traffic and really turn that into revenue. We needed to give them an environment where they felt that they could really achieve something, and it was nice for them to be able to come in with their teams. So in talent acquisitions, it almost functions like a group hire. But for us, it was great because we could basically, one of the first acquisitions we did was a company called Stamped. It was about 10 people in New York. They had built a beautiful application that was supposed to be the Foursquare of things. So instead of, Foursquare was when you would go and check in different places. This application was if you liked a book or if you liked a movie, you would sort of, punch it, and you could see other people who'd punched the same and see your friends who were seeing or watching the same things. And it just didn't take off like Foursquare. And they realized, look, we've got a great application, but it's not going to be Foursquare, it's not going to be Facebook, it's not going to be any of those things. And we said, okay, great, but now what we need is someone to come in and build a great video app, or build a great mail app, or build a great news app or finance app. And being able to take a ready-made team that had already worked together for 2 or 3 years, knew how to build a mobile application, knew how to design it, make it work, test it, deploy it, was actually a real accelerant for us, because we could buy these companies and immediately take that team and, in a matter of months, and sometimes less than a month, actually have a product out functioning in market.
Now, the basis of almost any company, tech company, is innovation. And you've gone out and hired talent. How do you keep the spirit of innovation alive within Yahoo?
Yeah, I think it's always the innovator's dilemma.
Yes.
It's nice to have as many resources as Yahoo has at your disposal, be it people, access to users, ways to deploy products. But at the same time, there is a huge responsibility that comes with Yahoo's scale, and also user expectations. And so that's something that we've really worked on and thought about over time. But I think that for us, we always will try to make sure that we're still pushing for innovation. And it might be we will throw out different challenges, like the CEO challenge, where people get to submit their ideas. We have hackathons. Now almost all companies have hackathons where the engineers will show up and kind of code all night, college style, and see what they can whip together in a day or 2. Yahoo is actually one of the first companies to ever do hackathons. I think they've been doing them there since 2002 or so. So we're constantly looking for ways and programs that try to systematize that innovation piece, so people remember that we always want to be reaching for that next thing, reaching out a little bit further into the future.
So what's next? What's next for Yahoo?
Well,
And we won't tell, will we? We'll keep it a secret amongst us.
I'm really proud of what we've done in mobile. It went from being a really immaterial part of our business to, last year I think we saw it being almost a quarter of our overall business and revenue and efforts. And I think that just continues. When you look at the rise of mobile, people are now spending 3 hours and 40 minutes on average, which means there's some people who spend more, obviously some people spend less, on their smartphone a day. It's actually your mobile devices plus your PCs, I think in 2013 surpassed television. So people spend more time actually on their laptop and phones combined than they do watching television, which I actually think is a good thing. But overall, but I think that there's such an opportunity there. And apps are really still early days. Yes, there's a lot of amazing applications, but and as much as I love the web, and the web will always be an important source of information, taking it and making it an experience, a really immersive experience on the phone in the form of an app is something that we're just starting to scratch the surface on, both at Yahoo and across the industry. And apps they're just overwhelmingly popular. If you actually, as I said, we bought this company Flurry, and they have amazing mobile analytics. They get to look at different patterns across different applications on 1.7 billion devices. So it's really the largest, 1.7 billion devices. And so they actually have probably the largest mobile data panel in the world. And what they're seeing is that people are spending 90% of their time on their phone in applications because they're just a really amazing way to interact. But we want to do a lot more. This past summer, we rolled out an interesting new app, Live Text, which is a new way of texting. It's video without sound, where you can overlay texting on top of it. So if you want to show someone a picture, but you don't want to have the interruption of the sound coming through like you would on a video chat, it's actually quite nice. And so we're starting to experiment with some of these communication elements. For us, the 3 core businesses we run are search, communications, and digital content. And so we're going to be pushing really hard on mobile in all 3 of those areas. I think mobile search will, as much as a lot of people think search is done, search will never be done. Thinking about when search will be done is like asking, when does human curiosity end? And the new format of mobile just presents so many new opportunities in terms of your phone understands a lot more about you. It can make search a lot more seamless, a lot more pointed, a lot more useful to you. So we're working really hard on mobile search. We're looking at what that next round of mobile communications applications look like. And then we're also thinking a lot about how do we take digital content and make it really easily accessible, enriching, personalized for people on their phones.
Marissa, you have had a stunning success, and I'm sure that you get asked often by people who are beginning their careers, what sort of pieces of advice to give them?
Oh, well, as I said, one of the nice pieces of advice I give people is, there's often not a right choice and a wrong choice. There's often many good choices, and it's about picking well and then committing to it. But I have a couple of pieces of advice. Some of them are based on my decision to go to Google. I think that you should always surround yourself with the smartest people you can find, because I think they push you to be better, just to think on that higher plane,
yes.
To do things you're not ready to do. I think that when you do things you're not ready to do, you have a moment where you learn that you are more capable than you thought, or you learn from the fact that you fell short from where you wanted to be, but they're both huge learning opportunities. And when I think about the best decisions I made, when I picked Google, I also had sort of looked back. I had all the different criteria, but I looked back and I found 2 criteria. I looked at what were decisions I had made in my life that I was really happy about. I was happy about changing into symbolic systems. I was happy about going to Stanford. I was happy that I'd gone to work at Stanford Research Institute one summer in the AI lab, and I was also really happy that I'd gone to work at the Union Bank of Switzerland for that summer. And they were very different decisions. I deliberately picked really different decisions and then said, well, what do they have in common? And I realized they all had 2 things in common. In each case, I got to work with the smartest people I could find, and they really challenged me, and it was just an amazing experience from that perspective. But in each case, I felt really unprepared. I did not feel at all prepared to move 2,000 miles from home, where I didn't know anyone, and go to school, and I found that really overwhelming. I remember going symbolic systems. I could barely even describe to my parents what it was, let alone what it would be good for, or how I might use it later in life. And so, that at the time, it was like, wait, is this a good decision or is this just a crazy decision? And Stanford Research Institute, I had taken basically a programming course or two, and then ended up at SRI, programming next to these AI legends who had literally written the textbooks I had used the previous quarter or would be using the next term. And it was just really amazing, but it was like being in a foreign country because I could only program in C, and the preferred programming language for a lot of AI folks is Lisp. And so I spent like a lot of the summer running around just trying to figure out like how to program in Lisp, like with these big manuals and asking people like, how do I get a global variable? Like, it was just, it was almost like being in a foreign country, and then actually getting to move to a foreign country. With the Union Bank of Switzerland and getting to work there for the summer, even though I don't speak German. And in each case, and I actually, I remember going to the grocery store the first day and trying to buy grapes. And it turns out like the European produce purchase system is very different than the US. You have to actually weigh it yourself, print out your own sticker, and I got into like a lot of trouble with the checkout lady, which I had been a checkout girl in my high school years, so I was like very baffled by the whole thing, but she was very upset with my great purchase. And I was like, oh my gosh, like what am I doing here? How did I think I could work and live here for the summer? Like I can't even buy grapes. But in each case, you kind of push through that fear and that like, what have I gotten myself into moment? And you get to learn a lot about yourself, and I think that's something that is I think good advice is in terms of finding the smartest people who will really push you, doing something you're not ready to do. But the other two things I'll tell young people who are starting out is two things. One, as was mentioned in the intro, I am very shy. I am really introverted.
We can tell.
And so, but I am very introverted, and as a result, it really helped me all those years at Google that I was surrounded by people who were like-minded, had the same passions and values, and it really gave me a voice. And I never thought about, I never had to stop myself and say, wait, should I say this? Because I knew, that I was, in an environment I was really comfortable in. So you should look for an environment that you're comfortable in. People will say, well, wait, you said, do things you're not ready to do, but then you're also saying be comfortable. And I almost think of it as like physical activity, right? You should push yourself really hard in the physical activity, but wear comfortable clothes, right? Okay. And so and so it's like you want to be somewhere where you're comfortable so you can really realize your full potential, have your voice, have your influence, but you want to push yourself to do more. And the other thing is, and I was really lucky, and we referred to a lot of these people throughout the conversation. I was lucky along the way to have, you could call them mentors, but people who really believed in me and invested in me. And a lot of people when they're starting out, they'll think about, okay, well, here's what I could contribute, to this company. Here's what I could do. It's okay to actually think, well, wait, what will I get, right? What will I get in terms of, you want someone who believes in you and invests in you and believes that you're going to take the next step and hit that next level and try something new. And I was constantly pushed to try new things, go manage Google Maps, try this general manager model, go to this seminar, meet these people. One of the first times that I got to meet Toby was working on Google Health. I didn't know very much about healthcare at all, and as we tried to
And I didn't know much about Google, so
and so, but I got to work on a lot of different things, and having someone who will give you those opportunities and push you, and really that's an investment in you is something that's really important.
Let me ask you one last question because it's in the discussion now, a lot of what's going on, artificial intelligence. There's an awful lot of people who are terrified of artificial intelligence and what it might mean for the future. And first of all, I realize we're not going to hold back progress. And I think it needs to be looked at as an opportunity. How do you see it? And do you see it as a concern for society? Do you see it as an opportunity for society?
I understand the arguments on both sides, but I tend to be very bullish on artificial intelligence, obviously given my background and just what I've seen happen. But I personally think that people have the scary scenarios that, okay, if you make the computer so smart, do they end up in charge? And I think that's a long way from where we are today,
yeah.
Right? Like when you look at the really fertile areas for artificial intelligence today, it's things like recognizing speech. right? So, you may, love her, you may hate her, but Siri is artificial intelligence. And I don't know about you, but I mean, I find that like actually the vocal dictation into my phone of things like emails has gotten really good. Text, and it's a big time saver. But just, even just that problem of saying, okay, can we program a computer to recognize phonemes, put them together, spell correct, use context, and help you type up an email or text faster and more accurately? To me, that's just such a time saving and such a step forward. But that's really where AI, in my view, is. And practically applied AI today is working on things like vocal recognition, like language translation. Can we actually bring the world closer together by, translating content across borders? Image recognition, can we actually make more sense out of the many images that are being generated, around the world in all different domains today, and do a better job of really helping people understand that visual information. And to me, the advances that have come from it just really outweigh all the disadvantages. And I think when we get to a tipping point, I think we're going to know it before we actually get there. And I think that's the people who are afraid of it will say, well, wait, we won't know when the tipping point's about to come. And I actually think that we likely will.
Marissa, you've taken us on a wonderful journey today. You've taken us from high school right straight through all the way to Yahoo and up here into the future. And I can't thank you enough. We're very appreciative. We're appreciative of the time that you spent and the things that you have given us insight into. Thank you very much. We're most appreciative.
Thank you.
And I want to invite all of you, including Marissa, to come back and visit with us. First of all, the 2015 Medical Innovation Summit is going to be on October 25th to the 28th, which I think will be a great opportunity to see the latest that's going on in the development of healthcare. And then also our next ideas for tomorrow's speakers. On November 17th, David Gregory is going to be here, who has led Meet the Press for a number of years. And then Jim Collins is coming on the 8th of December, as he is the author of Good to Great. So once again, Marissa, I can't thank you enough. This has been an absolutely inspiring hour, and thank you.
Thank you.